Thank you, everybody. And I realize that we're kind of sitting between you and the lunch. So we'll be very conscious of that. And then we'll try and see if we can wrap this up on time for sure. But look, what a wonderful day. I mean, I was very impressed when I came in and saw such a big crowd. And we have a phenomenal guest with us. And then, of course, you heard all the introduction we're very lucky to have Manish with us today. So I'm going to do a little bit different of a discussion than what we normally have. I know that we had a heavy dose of artificial intelligence and generative AI and whatnot for the whole of yesterday and today. So we will try and see if we can stay away from it. But I don't know, these days, you can't even finish a sentence without using AI. This morning I was with some of your leaders in a small room, and I was trying not to use the word artificial intelligence for a longest period of time, but I could not. It has to eventually have something to do with AI. But our topic is very interesting. Right? How do you really stay agile, resilient, and quite honestly, being relevant to whatever we do? And I was just looking at some of the numbers. When you go back and look at what this S&P 500 list, which has been around for the longest period of time in the United States, and then when you look at the age of companies in the S&P 500, it used to be 67 years at one point in time. Companies continued in this S&P 500 list for a very, very long period of time. The average was 67. Today, the average time a company has been in the list is only 15 years, which means it's come down drastically. What does it really mean? That means there are expectations from these companies to perform in a certain way. They drop off the list pretty often, and then there are new companies getting into this list. So it is because of the fact that the inability for companies to stay agile, resilient, and relevant, if you may, right? So that's the reason why you find that this list is actually becoming very dynamic, as well as the age or the number of years that companies will stay in this list is going to only go down as the years go by, because of the fact that the demand for staying resilient is very, very high, and then the ability for companies to compete. And I was talking to Manish earlier on why, in my mind, resiliency has become so much more important than many other aspects of an organization, because I recall this very vividly. Pre-pandemic, if you may, pre-COVID, you found that most companies sort of doubled down on this efficiency angle. Everybody wanted to be efficient, right? So that you really had to do everything in an efficient way. And pandemic taught us that it's not going to be sufficient. You got to be resilient. You got to be resilient because your supply chain has to be resilient. And some people just completely fell off the wagon because of the fact that they were over-indexed on efficiency, did everything from a certain country or a certain geography. And then when it came to truly continuing your business through a major event like a pandemic, they couldn't sustain because of the fact that they were not resilient. So people were sort of rethinking the supply chain and how they really wanted to run their business. So they compromised a little bit of efficiency for resiliency. So the fact that you need to be resilient. So that became most important for the company to survive, and which becomes the fact that you ought to also make sure that you are finding out ways of becoming a resilient organization in many ways. So I don't want to take away too much more time, but the fact that we have Manish today with us, we're going to pivot to some of the conversations around what really makes companies thrive, what makes companies a little more agile, resilient, and of course relevant to whatever we do, right? And for those of you, you heard Manish's introduction, so I'm not going to do that again. Phenomenal career, Manish. Congratulations on being in the company since 1992. You've done a phenomenal amount of work for the company itself. And Asian Paints as an organization, as all of you know, 75 years now, which is, so for a company to be relevant and still has 50% of market share, it's not going to be easy. And then you'll understand what they did to make sure that the leadership continued for such a long period of time. And it's not only a top painting and coating company. Well, we'll talk about that in a little bit, as they probably want to pivot themselves into something else, but also amongst the top 10 in the world. So I know that we're going to let Manish speak for sure. For the rest of the for the rest of the event, I'll shut up and I'll let Manish speak. But I want to start with this thought by saying every company is a technology company today. You would relate to it in the room, but that every company is becoming a technology company. That being the case, and Manish, when we spoke earlier, you mentioned about delivering on promises. So give your initial thoughts around what Asian Paints did to deliver on promises and how it's sort of transformed over the last 75 years and the usage of technology in particular.
So I think thank you to nasscom for sort of presenting what we've done, and thank you to Rajesh for also spending some time to figure out what would be best received for all of you to sort of take something away from this conversation other than just me speaking kudos about the company I work for. I think let's look at the journey of Asian Paints in terms of how we grew as a company. Early days, obviously, we were a challenger. There were already multinationals in the country that were doing business, and Asian Paints was the one that came into being and disrupted, so to speak, the industry by introducing paints in small packs. So I think the early days was all about product disruption. We created a product, a 50 ml container, a 100 ml container, and then sold it and found means to get it to the dealers who at that point of time were selling the products to end consumers like you and me. I think those were the very early days when product disruption was all about. But by the time the 80s came around, it was all about penetration. India was growing, and we'd still not hit liberalization, but India was growing, and there was a need to build distribution platforms. And those were the days when everything was concocted within the company. There was no ERPs out there. So Asian Paints built in the early days a tracking signal to figure out on punch cards, actually it ran, was what I was told much before my time, that allowed you to put in all the sales you wanted, put in the orders that we got, and create effectively a demand signal so that we knew what we wanted to produce. And those were the early days of technology. We had something of an ICIM or ICIM machine at that point of time in Bhandup, which was the only manufacturing plant we had. And so those were early days when we used technology to be able to predict what we could make. So we had the product. Now we needed to know what of the product we needed to make out there. Next wave, where do we make it? Because we started having multiple plants. And so we created as technology the multi-plant distribution model. What can we make where and how effectively we can deploy it to the market was what we developed. And then maybe when I joined the company and took over IT, I think we really started working on integration of all these platforms on a single platform out there. And then layering it with intelligence on supply chain and how to deliver. At that point of time, we had 40,000 retailers. We had 60 warehouses in the country. We had 4 manufacturing plants. And we carried 56 days of finished goods inventory across manufacturing plants and our warehouses. And we delivered to 40,000 dealers pretty much every day, 2 times a day. And so there was a fairly big forecasting challenge. There was a fairly big supply chain issue that we've got. And had we continued on the trajectory without the sort of influx of technology, we would have probably run out of money in terms of growth. Instead, we took this route. We took out almost 26 days of finished goods inventory between 2001 and 2004. That day, it meant 250 crores in cash, and we became debt-free. If I was to multiply it by the scale and size that we are at today, that would be almost $6 billion in working capital cash that we took out over this period of time. So I think that's a phenomenal sort of efficiency driver that we went through.
Right.
And we then wired the company, so to speak, to be able to deliver consistently. So what did the supply chain do? It gave us efficiency. What did the ERP do? It gave us efficiency, being able to deliver to our end consumers. We were taking orders in multiple locations. We have now taking central orders, and of course, with the advent of mobile technology, we are taking orders on mobile apps from our retailers and are being able to deliver to them. So I think the company in sort of invested for efficiency, like you mentioned, but I think when we look at it from a little bit of a distance, we built a lot of resiliency on the platform. If a branch, why do you think we moved to a central order taking cell? Was because in the branches, BSNL was just not giving us enough telephone lines. And so we were missing calls and missing orders at that point of time. We moved to the app or a web-based platform for order taking so that our retailers could place orders at night and be ready for next day when they could get material delivery by 11. So I think one invested for efficiency, but one took care to make the company sort of a 24/7 operation to keep it on in some sense of the word. The ERP was on all the time. The manufacturing plants were connected. So moving from a distributed, information technology architecture to a slightly more data center centric architecture, which ran with standardized processes, helped us actually gain a significant amount in efficiency, but even more so in being able to run every day and thus stay alive.
So a related question to what you just now said, and you mentioned about data, and you made this shift from Asian Paints as a coating company to Asian Paints as a decor company. And during that process, we talk about artificial intelligence, especially around generative AI and all of that. There is a significant emphasis on data, and the previous speakers were talking about data. I'm sure there are many the importance of data in the whole scheme of things. And you had this customer data, and then you were very proud of what you did with it. So maybe a couple of sentences around why was data so relevant, and what did you do with it?
So I think the first thing, even before we go to consumers, data was very relevant even with our retailers. So Asian Paints model is to go directly to the mom and pop retailer. I think being able to predict what they would order every day so that order taking was facilitated both on the telephony platform or the application, the app platform that they chose to use, was like a testament to how we would be able to mine data from a predictive analytics point of view, not AI, but predictive analytics at that point of time. I think those were early days when we recognized that if we could do something with the history that we had got and something with what we wanted to sort of put into the market, and we were to make a mix of that, I think we would be able to use the order taking platform almost to drive a particular kind of consumer sale that we wanted to do in the marketplace. So I think those were early days. We recognized the power of data. I think the second place where we recognized the power of data was in end consumers. We soon started saying that we were not going to sell a can of paint, but we were going to sell a painted wall. And that was born in the heydays of the internet. 2004 was early days when we launched Asian Paints Home Solutions. And it remained a company service in 12 cities. And in those 12 cities, we were painting end consumer homes. And in the early days of the service, we were using the data collected from those end homes to be able to sharpen the products that we got, which means the defects on the wall, the paint, the practices for sort of construction. We were mining all of that data that came onto the platform in terms of product complaints, in terms of usage, and being able to deliver products and solutions, but more importantly, training material to the contractors and painters who utilize our products to be able to deliver it better to consumers. So one is to make your product better. The other is to make the ecosystem that uses your products to deliver paint solutions and services much better. And I think that was a phenomenal move that was done using just the data that we got out there. And today, building on that data platform, we are able to sort of deliver entire decor solutions on that platform. So we moved to a different data platform, moved away from CRM, and are bringing in not only internal company data, but external sources of data, even from third-party service providers, to be able to predict what the consumer would want to do and how we can deliver it using the ecosystem that we have got with the different products that we now have today.
So that's a great story around both, in some sense, resiliency, and also, I think I recall you mentioning about the adaptability of the organization, especially, you know, every organization before the pandemic had all of this notion of, oh, we are very resilient, we are adaptable, we can do this, we have the best supply chain, etc. But during, again, I keep going back to the pandemic because that actually was one phase where it tested pretty much everything in terms of what a company is and can do. And clearly, in your case, Manish, I think you had completely had not just you, but the whole world had this issue of supply chain completely going out of whack. And then you mentioned this story around the sanitizer, and I know it was quite intriguing as to how you kind of completely leverage that opportunity to do something differently. So you may want to highlight the story a little bit for that.
So I think first thing first, when you talked about resiliency, on the 8th of April, we took the entire tech platform for loyalty management that we ran, and we delivered to all the painting contractors all of their annual incentives within a matter of 14 days. So we made sure that the ecosystem that utilized our products, that sort of made money on our products, we recognized that they would be out of work and they needed the incentive to be delivered earlier. And we utilized technology to be able to do it instantaneously. And obviously we utilized public technology. By then, RTGS, NEFT, UPI, all of that was leveraged to be able to deliver money to all the people who supported us as a company, utilizing our products for services, and delivered it in an instance. So that was the first thing that we did. Then as we went along and the first wave of COVID was over, and the world was learning to cope with remaining partially open, but carefully open in some sense of the word, we recognized that being an essential manufacturing outfit was necessary to remain open. And so the company utilized the capacity that we had got in some of our plants to make emulsions, to make actually sanitizers. That was a need of the hour because the government wanted more sanitizer outfits. They wanted capable manufacturing people. So it was not as if we sort of abused the requirement of their. But we recognized in fulfilling that requirement that we were able to keep our factories open, which means the workmen came in, we housed them within the factories, but we were able to manufacture out there. And slowly but surely, trickle by trickle, we began actually, delivering paint to outlets as India opened up progressively. So it was not as if you were shut and then suddenly 4 months later, everything got turned open. I think there was a gradual manner in which we were able to operate our factories. I think also tech helped. Work from home was enabled relatively quickly because we were so embedded deeply on technology and being able to use technology. I think we had to get the hardware devices to people's homes and bolster the connectivity that we had got. All of that was possible, but I think what really worked was the fact that we were a connected company. So 3 things, being able to make sure that the people who work, they get paid on time so that they are loyal to you. Then to be able to re-engineer products so that we could remain open. And finally, utilize the tech platform that we had got to actually make sure that we could deliver what we wanted to deliver in the most efficient manner that we could at that point of time. I think all of that worked. And I think it was testimony to the kind of, profit we were not hurting. I think, we had a wrongly sent out letter which kind of said, we're going to have some real crunch on working capital, just an efficiency letter, which was misread by a lot of analysts in the market. And there was like a rumor that Asian Paints needed money. But notwithstanding that fiasco, I think we managed to
Yeah.
deliver stellar profit. We had positive cash flows for the year. And I think we remained open and we were able to come out of COVID a lot stronger with many new capabilities that we had got to be able to drive the company a lot further.
Great segue to what I also want to talk about, the fact that most of the folks in the audience are from the GCC ecosystem. Um, this morning, as I mentioned, we had a small round table with some of your leaders. Um, one thing for me, one of the things I took out of that, there are many things, but there's one of the things which kind of struck me is that this whole notion of culture. So the GCCs have a certain type of culture, and then they always look at this quote-unquote parent, if you may, wherever they are from, Europe, US, wherever, Asia Pacific. And then this, so us versus them kind of a thing going on a little bit, and I'm sure some of you are aware of what I'm talking about. Whereas I think some of you have beaten that thing that there is no us versus them, there's a single culture which holds you running or being part of a center in India or wherever it is, and then with the rest of the organization, not just the headquarters, but rest of the organization. So that was the kind of a thing which I had a brief opportunity to talk to Manish this morning. So Manish, give us some sense of why culture is so important in any company, especially to do being resilient, being relevant to what you need to do in the long run, and any message for the GCCs as to how they should look at their headquarters, if you may, in a different way.
So I think one of the things that Asian Paints recognized very early on that the core was always going to be relatively small. We still have about 500-600 people in the office. Less than 10% of the workforce sits in the headquarters. And it's probably been at that 10% mark for a very long period of time. So even though as the company grew, I think the core has remained fairly compact in that sense of word. But as a company that strives to work with an ecosystem, dealers, contractors, painters, and now end consumers, we need to stand for something to each of these people. And that's something that we stand for needs to be sort of delivered in a very consistent manner out there, despite number of people changing or people moving, etc., etc. And I think that has been, and how to get it done has been a combination of technology, training, but most importantly, learning from leaders, making sure that leaders moved around within the company. Leaders played a very, very sort of exemplary role in exemplifying, in sort of talking through or even acting out what they meant to be, to do things in an Asian Paints way, for lack of better. And I think that was built systematically up, and that has stood us in very, very good stead as we grew as a company. I still remember 1992, we joined. I still have a coin. We were just about 1,000 crores in size, and we are at about 30,000 crores in turnover today. 31 years from the time I joined the company. So it's been a fairly big bump up. I don't think it would have been possible if we had not stuck to sort of an Asian Paints way. Is there a Asian Paints way written? The answer is no. There is no document that I can find that there is an Asian Paints way written. Sure, there are documents on integrity, on value written, but there is a practice of culture, and I think that's really important. Interpolation of people across functions, which we've done fairly assiduously. Trying to make sure that we climbed onto a diversity sort of bandwagon pretty early, though the industry is not very favorable. We are a very mom and pop industry having to deal with a lot of male diaspora. So it's fairly hard to do that in sales, but I think we've jumped onto the bandwagon early and found solutions to that. So I think all in all, we grew the culture in a particular way, and I think that has carried on to our international operations. That's carried on to the culture of detail, the culture of being able to handle a lot of complexity and still be able to deliver it in a simplified manner. Many of those things have been done there to almost to the point where uh, putting an IT solution out is not very difficult at Asian Paints because there is an innate desire from business to be able to just use IT for scalability and resilience, as
Exactly.
you put it earlier. So I think many things that we just sort of do that. I think couple of things that work. Success works. So I would say to all of you in GCC, if you do great work and that great work is recognized by the center as well as the other centers you've got, I think there is recognition that you become an equal partner, that you have a right to sort of
You almost
be
earned
there,
that, earned
earn
that
that right.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that's extremely important. And I've seen, it wouldn't have been possible to do all of the stuff we did with tech had tech not been successful in delivering business results. So I think not only should you do great solutions, but those great solutions should impact business and impact business positively. Otherwise, it's intellectual ecstasy that we get into, or we get into even worse, which is I'm the back office guy who's sort of driving efficiency. It's when you make business work differently is when you sort of get recognized. So uh, all of you here should strive to convince your leadership to be able to give you something of thereof and do that chance pretty well so that you get that recognition, and one success gets more and it's a multiplier factor after that. So I think that's extremely important. The other is to recognize that there is a global culture for whatever technology stands for within your companies. But then there is a little bit of a blend of local culture, and you as leaders within the local culture need to adapt some of the things that the global culture talks about to a local flavor so that there is not that us versus them philosophy, but more of, okay, we took this and we made it our own. And almost in many cases I've seen where it works successfully, you're sort of giving it back, where the global organization recognizes that you've got something actually to give back. That's when you've been really successful. So I think those have been some learnings that we've had in our business when our international units came back and said, hey, you know what? We can utilize raw material very differently that India as a large organization couldn't. And supply chain in India, which was used to dealing in very big numbers, decided to learn how international was sourcing more nimbly in some sense of the word and change the culture of resilience within the Indian supply chain quite significantly. So I think those are some of the stories that I can talk about that make you unique as a company. And I think it should be our endeavor to do that.
Absolutely. No, you've said it beautifully. And I did have a lot more to talk about, but the time is up. I wish we could take some questions from the audience. If there is any profound and compelling question any of you have, I can take one. Otherwise, we're going to wrap this up. Anybody who wants to ask a question from somewhere? Yeah, why don't you? We could take only one question, but why don't you use the mic there and then, yeah.
So Manish, thank you so much. We earlier heard that the relevance of companies is coming down from the years standpoint. What exactly is the org doing to making sure that it stays relevant?
What does it, so if I mean, there's an echo, so I'm just repeating your question. What does it take to remain relevant
Yes.
as we go forward? So I think one, recognizing that you have a core and making sure that that core always remains strong, healthy, and continues to grow, which is our coatings business, and we feel that way. And I think understanding the consumer requirements, we recognize that there is a need for us to move from share of surface, which is where we do coatings and wallpaper and waterproofing, to share of space, which is where we do lighting and kitchen and bath and some of the fabric solutions and the furniture solutions we are trying to get into. So I think staying relevant is to make sure that the core gives us some opportunities to expand on those opportunities and to build it on that core in some sense of word. So for many, the world of decor seems like a diversification. For me, looking at it from our lens, it seems like actually growing the core into something which could be even bigger and sharper than where we are today. So I think that's what it takes to really remain there, that you understand your core, but you figure out ways to take offshoots from that and really grow, which in turn strengthens the core and you become much larger can stay more relevant, stay more resilient.
Great. Thank you, Manish. And great thoughts. I really like the way you're sort of navigated through all of the topics that we want to talk about, staying agile, staying resilient, of course, and staying relevant to what we do. With that, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands for Manish Choksi.
For more content on tech and leadership, subscribe to NASSCOM YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.